All right, let's go ahead and get started. I've got a meeting at 9 and then Epic's coming in a little after that. Today's a little eclectic, okay, but I want to cover a few things that you guys need to know, and then I'm counting on you guys to just take it from there on your own, okay? What I'm seeing from a business perspective is that I fear that we're not taking on the level of growth that we need to individually, right? Like, it's easy to set up a mindset of this is my job, I'm doing my job, end of day, right? People are, I get about 5 calls a day, or all my customers are happy, so job done, right? And I've warned you guys, and I'm very serious in that we have huge things on the horizon. I mean, it's Heather and I sit out back at night, and we were talking about this last night. Like yesterday, the least important thing we worked on was like a $60 million project, right? Okay. I mean, like, the things that we have to juggle on a daily basis are huge. At this point, we have a team of 20 to 25 people, okay? Every one of you guys has to be growing into the next role, okay? There's not a position here that I look at and say, that I can just put a metric on and say, you're doing a good job, check, keep doing it, right? Because that job should not exist in the future, okay? You have to grow out of it. The amount of time you spend with a customer, if it's 40 hours to get a customer into our software until they're competent using it at like a level 1 stage, and another 40 hours until they're doing auditing and running the system like an expert, that's 80 hours every customer we bring on, right? That means your job isn't to give 80 hours of customer support so that they become an expert. Your job is to give 80 hours of customer support so they become an expert, and do it in such a way that the next customer only takes 70 hours and the next customer only takes 60 hours, until we can get to a point where that's almost automated, right? Whether that's updating the software system to make it easier to understand, if it's updating training material, if it's improving your style of teaching or training, or making things more clear, or creating certifications or tests. You see what I'm saying? There's a lot more to everyone's job, especially at the advisor level, than just answering the phone and making sure our customers are satisfied. Okay, just to kind of break that down further, like Pablo, okay, just came on board. He's doing audio video work, right? So from a job description perspective, as long as he is setting up the camera correctly, recording the audio correctly, giving us some good logos, most people in that position would feel like, yes, I'm doing a good job, right? I'm moving forward, right? This is what the company hired me to do. I'm doing it great. And in that regard, I can pat him on the back or slap him on the ass and say, good job, okay? But the reality is, a year from now, it's very likely that we will be making a documentary, right? Or a mini series that will require us to have production schedules and stylists and makeup teams and audio video editing that can be world class, right? If you're not growing to be able to handle that kind of load, a year from now, we can't do that. Right? If you're not taking this time to grow, then a year from now, when that need arises, we won't be able to fulfill it, right? You guys know we're working on a hospital, leukemia-based, leukemia research center, right? That's going to happen. I'm almost positive that's going to happen. If that happens, right, we're leading a team of world-class researchers. If all you know how to do is work the software the way it is right now, we're not going to be able to run a world-class facility, right? I'm going to have to reach out and find people from the rest of the world and then train them up. You guys have been here, right? It's your job to get to that level. And what that means, I can't sit down and write all of those things out. You have to have a passion for self-improvement, okay? Anywhere you see an area that affects business, healthcare, communication, leadership, you need to proactively go after it, right? If you guys know, like, the foundation of our company philosophy is very much that richest man in Babylon book and the book of Proverbs out of the Bible. You cannot read the book of Proverbs without getting a very, very clear understanding that riches, wealth, long life, prosperity, happiness are byproducts of seeking wisdom, right? And wisdom, that word kind of throws us off because we don't use it very often in modern day language. We say education. Well, education is simply gathering facts, right? Knowledge is an understanding of where those facts come from. It's a higher level. Wisdom is the ability to apply those facts appropriately in a given situation, right? So you know how to click a button in the software. That's education, right? Our job isn't just to educate, right? You have to have the knowledge of why the button click does what it does, and then you need the wisdom to be able to explain to people when to click that button, right? And that's a very, very simple situation, right? If we're dealing with the politics of having to, I mean, let's say this. When we start building our hospital and we find in a regulation that we can't have cabins, we have to have patient rooms inside of a hospital, okay, which we've studied and we don't, but let's say that was actually in the law that we stumble across, okay? That almost runs our entire hospital concept, okay, to most people. But like I've told you guys, there is no such thing as impossible, right? I mean, even as Christians, it's written in there, right? With God, nothing is impossible, okay? What we are moving toward in that situation, most people would say it's a done deal, it's over, we can't do the hospital the way we wanted to. But if you look at reality, like if you understood politics, right? If we had spent the previous year making political connections, then maybe we could use some of those to speak to the people who make regulations to get those changed for this particular situation, okay? But if we run into that roadblock a year from now and we have no political connections, we're dead in the water, right? Again, simple situation, but what I'm trying to tell you guys is that you're in this stage of growth. Consider it the off season, right? If you tell me, if you can sit there and flex your mind, consider like a high school kid who goes around flexing his muscles July, like April, May, June, and ignores the kids who are in the weight room, right? And says, look, I'm strong enough to play pickup basketball, and I'm one of the most athletic kids out here on the playground, and there are other kids that are in the weight room all summer long. Come August, when they go to play football, right, who's going to be the one who wins the game, right? It's the people who've been building their strength through that entire off season. That's why all sports teams have placed so much emphasis and money on off-season workouts and strength and conditioning coaches, right? Because you need the strength, you need to build the strength in advance of having to use it. All right, so enough motivation, but I need you guys to understand that's where we are, every one of you. Okay, so you have a job that's hopefully clearly delineated. The undelineated or unexplained part is that you're growing into something else. But if you're not taking those growth measures You need to understand things are moving very quickly, and very quickly you will be bypassed, and we can't have that, right? It's easy to say we're going to bypass you and bring in somebody else. The reality of that is very difficult, right? Bringing somebody in off the street, even if they have the requisite skills, still requires a lot of training. I would much rather, we'd be much better off with you guys having developed that on your own. So this morning we have a very eclectic menu of topics I want to discuss. First, before I forget it, is just some basic business competencies for running financials. Okay, unless you guys have worked at like an accounting firm, or you've taken some accounting classes, or you've studied this on your own, then you're going to be lacking when you actually have to discuss this with the CEO. Okay, when we talked about those monthly financial reports, especially yearly financial reports, there are three accounting reports that are basically run every type of business. When we're looking to sell businesses as a brokerage company, there are three reports that I ask for, two of which are extremely important, and you can't really get a deal done without them. The first is a profit and loss statement, P&L. In case I forget this later, I'm telling you guys these three with the intention that you will get online and research them and be very familiar with what goes in to each item. Okay, a profit and loss report tells you just that, what revenue the company brought in during that time period. So we would do this once a month, and then of course for the entire year. If we were selling a business, the profit and loss report is the first thing we would run, because it tells us how much money the business actually made. So you get all of your revenue numbers. Okay, meaning if it was for HealthTrust, we would run all of our user fees, our monthly user fees. It would pull in our service revenue, meaning trainings, startup. We'd have a line item for startup costs, database setup fees, etc. We would have training cost. We would have, all the software or the hardware that we resell. Okay, all of that's going to go into that first section of your report, which is your revenue number, your income number. The next bottom half of that report would be your expenses. Okay, that's going to be cash that's leaving your office in one way or another. So primarily payroll, which in almost every business, payroll, the cost of your employees, is almost always the largest percentage of expense that goes out the door. You have cost of goods sold, which I think technically you guys, maybe this will be a good learning project. Find out where cost of goods sold goes on a profit and loss report. Does it go under income, or does it go under the expense section? Right? You'd have office supplies, maintenance costs, fees for, in our situation, what we have to pay to our clearinghouses, what we have to pay to Medicare for connectivity, internet cost, electricity, building lease, all of the stuff, the expenses that it takes to run a business. Okay? Then you're going to have a third section, which is generally called your owner's equity, which would be the difference between the two, effectively. Okay? Meaning, the very bottom of your P&L will generally, actually I may be getting this off. Your P&L would be the income and then expenses to give you a gross profit. All right. Then you have a balance sheet. That's our second report. And this effectively tells us what the business is worth on paper. Okay. So the top half of that is going to be our assets, meaning all of the things that we own, which would be accounts receivable, which is worth some dollar amount, the value of our computers and our desk and our intellectual property, the value of our software, the value of our sometimes brand or name recognition, if you can quantify that. But effectively, it's all of the things that if we liquidated or sold for cash would be worth some dollar amount. The second half of that report would be all of our liabilities. If we still owe taxes, which you almost always carry some type of balance because every time we take money in, on a user fee, part of that is our money as income, part of that is the sales tax that we have to pay once a month, right? So during that month before we pay our sales tax, we have this liability of unpaid sales tax. Other liabilities may be debts, right? If we took out a loan that we need to pay back. And then the third part of that report would be your owner's equity, which is generally the difference between the two. Your balance sheet should balance out to zero at the end of it. So if we have our assets worth $1 million, we have liabilities worth $500,000, and we have owner's equity of $500,000. All right, the third report is called a statement of cash flows. In a business, the number one reason that businesses go bankrupt or shut down is because of cash flow, okay? If I can sell our software to a customer for $10 million, okay, and it only costs me $100,000 to get that customer, right, and service them. What's my gross profit? Yeah, or net profit, I should say. Yeah, $9,900,000. Million. Fantastic, right? I should be able to sell, and if I can sell those, like 100 of those, right? We're in the million. I mean, we're multi-millionaires, right? We're doing great. Except, what if I told you, like if I told you that scenario, you would say that's a fantastic business, right? But what if I told you you had to pay the $100,000 today and you don't get the $10 million for 2 years? Then how good of a business is it, right? It's a great business if you can afford a few $1,000,000 for the next 2 years, right, to get all those customers. 2 years from now, you're going to be mega wealthy, but most likely you're going to be out of business before then, okay? That's the idea behind cash flow. You have to balance how much money you're bringing in versus how much money you're paying out. Most businesses do a very poor job of that because most transactions aren't instantaneous, right? You'll see generally the economy is working more and more toward that. You pay up front. Like if you go online to Amazon, you're going to give them your credit card information right then and there. Then they ship you the item. But a lot of things aren't like that, right? If you buy supplies from a vendor, like in our situation, we sell software. A lot of our clients don't pay us for 30 days. Okay, so we're out of the cost of giving them software today, but we may not get the money in for 30 days, and that's if they pay their bills on time. Okay, if they start delaying their payment, we may go 60 days without payment. Okay, our business has worked itself toward the opposite end of the spectrum, right? So now our clients actually pay us in advance. So their very first month, they pay it up front, and then they get the software for a month. They pay, and then they get the software for a month, because of the beauty of cash flow, right? It's also the killer of cash flow. That's why you run a statement of cash flows, because it lets you know during a given time period how much money is going in and how much money is coming in and going out. All right, so assignment is for you guys to go online, print out samples, one sample of a P&L, a sample of a balance sheet, and a sample of a statement of cash flows, and be able to identify what goes on to each and why you would want to run it. Okay, what's the benefit of having those 3 reports? Yeah. all the report, I bring that up as advisors when we're talking about those monthly financials that people run. We look in the software and we say, oh, they want to know how much money they made for, how much they billed out for Medicare, what the contractual amount was, what they were paid, right? So we have that screen on the Quick Consultant that tells them all of these things, how many missed visits they had, how many uncollectible visits they had, etc. Don't get distracted though. Those are simply data points that are eventually going into a profit and loss. Profit and loss is the main thing they're worried about. Okay, they take those numbers and they add them into QuickBooks or whatever accounting system they're using, because that system has their lease and electricity, right? When you look at it in our software, our profit and loss that we created the other day, that report, it's really good, but it only takes into account, here's what you billed, here's what you were paid, here's what you paid out in employee costs, right? Here's your payroll costs, which again is the biggest factor as an expense, but we don't know what any of our customers pay for their property lease, like their electricity, their insurance, their car notes, all of those other expenses right now we don't carry in the software. That is part of our future plan within the software, but we don't have it right now. We have to build basically a whole accounting system to do that. Well, so again, the data points that they're getting out of the system are being plugged into another software system in order to give a true profit and loss report, and then their balance sheet, and then their statement of cash flows. Okay, these are the three reports in general that all companies want to know. Larger companies will want other reports that are similar, but are used for different operational purposes. For instance, a lot of companies will pay a sales commission based upon profit and loss. Okay, so if I am the marketer for Dr. Smith, and Dr. Smith referred 10 patients this month, and I, as a marketer, get a commission for the profit for those patients, right? As a company, I don't want to pay for gross revenue, right? If we get a patient that brought in $2,000 this month and I'm paying a commission of 10%, that's $200, right, that I paid to that salesperson. Well, what happens if we received $2,000 for that patient, but we had to make 100 visits that cost us $200 each? Right, I actually lost money on that patient. Then I turned around and had to give a commission of $200 to a sales guy, which cost me even more money, right? So when they structure, again, the level of customer that you work with will determine, the reason I'm going into so much detail is because you're going to work with some businesses that, frankly, 50% of the businesses that are out there, even the ones that we work with, that I think are better than the average, don't know much about business finances, okay? A lot of home health agencies especially were started by clinicians who understand rendering care in the home. They don't really get into this full financial side of the business. That's true for a lot of businesses, right? People know how to make sandwiches. People have told them their whole life they make an excellent stromboli. So they decide to open up an Italian restaurant, okay? But they never take into account that the 6-month lease that they acquired, where they're having to buy equipment and set up their shop, they're not making any money, and that's why in the 7th month they go bankrupt right after they open up their stromboli business, right? With home health, it's the exact same thing. So I'm giving you some of this background because some people you work with won't care at all about a profit and loss report. Okay, they're going to run some long list of visits out of their system. They're going to turn it over to their CPA once a year to run their cost report, and he's basically going to finagle numbers, right? He's going to say he's going to run like their Medicare report. Medicare has some PS&L reports that give you like gross revenue numbers that Medicare paid in, or he's going to look at their bank account and say, okay, you deposited $1 million in the bank account, you rendered 1,500 skilled nursing visits this year, and you paid out in payroll $500,000, and he's going to kind of reverse engineer those numbers. Right? You're going to have a lot of customers who operate off of that model, which of course means they can't predict cash flow in the future. They're basically looking at their bank's balance every day and realizing, oh, we have $50,000 in the bank and I have $45,000 in payroll coming out this Friday. Whew, we're in good shape, right? Let's make it to the next pay period. Unfortunately, that's the vast majority of customers that you will be dealing with. I want you to understand that that's reality, but when you start dealing with larger, especially publicly traded companies, they can't get by with that, right? They have to have projections of cash flow, projections of profitability, and then you have, of course, businesses in between who want to know right off the bat at the end of the month what their profit and loss for the past month was, usually because they have a board of directors who wants to know that information so that they can do projections later on. Okay. But you have to understand those three reports. All right, the other project I want you guys to work on, we're changing gears completely, is your ability to write and communicate in a business-friendly manner. Okay, most of you probably didn't take a business communication class in college. It's almost unheard of in high school. And even in college, we tend to have word counts, right, that say you have to write this amount, like a minimum amount, right? You have to turn in a 10-page paper. Even if you could say the same thing in 1 page, you have to write 10 pages worth of information. Okay, the reality is that's like the shittiest way of teaching people how to write, okay? Unless you're trying, well, really I can think of no reason that you would want to write 10 pages when 1 would do, okay? And in business, it's absolutely critical. When you write an email and you have 5 sentences of filler, when you could have said 3 words in your subject line of the email, that's a business communication failure, okay? You want to be concise and clear. 2 rules, concise and clear, meaning short and easily understandable. When you look at quick primer on business in general or making money in general, which you would learn if you would read The Richest Man in Babylon. Yeah, it is amazing in principle though, okay? You make money by receiving more money in than you spend out, right? That's fairly simple, right? So there are 3 ways to increase the money that you make or the amount of money that you have. One is to either increase that difference, right? Increase the amount of money you make per transaction. So I can charge more or I can reduce my expenses and make more money. Okay. The other way is to get more customers. Okay, if I can sell 1 customer 1 widget and I can sell 100 customers 100 widgets, or 100 customers that same 1 widget, right? I've increased my profit 100-fold. The third is to increase the number of widgets we sell per customer, right? There's only 3 ways to make money. So velocity, which Chris hears me talk about a lot, is honestly probably the most important factor in making money, right? If just take that scenario similar that I told you earlier, if I told you I can make $1 million profit per sale, or I can make half a penny per sale, which one's better? No, the answer is you don't know, because I excluded the most important piece of that equation, which are the terms of the deal, right? If I tell you you can make $1 million per sale, but you can only sell 1 per lifetime, or if I told you you can do the Amazon method of making 0.5 cent per sale, but you can do that 1 million times per second, Which one is the better deal? All right, it's an old rich white guy joke was what you can set the price as long as I can set the terms. Meaning, I don't care if I have to pay $1 million more than this is worth. If I can set the terms to say I don't pay you for 50 years, I win. Okay? When we're talking about business communication, you have to keep that velocity in mind. If you take up 5 sentences of my time when you could have only taken up 3 words of my time, you've just cost me 500% return on investment. Okay? You're stealing from my life. Now, most people either don't think in those terms or they're too nice to tell you that. But I will, business owners, even those that don't think in financial terms very often, still are very compressed for time. Okay? So when you try to write them a long email and you think you're doing good, you are in fact doing bad because of the length of your email, right? We have to be very, very concise. So when you're responding to a list of issues, right? We've got the email. Lindsay and I have been working on an email, and Heather jumped in yesterday. A client sent 4 problems that they had. Right? We could spend the first several sentences of that email saying, I appreciate you sending me your list of complaints. I've reviewed them. I appreciate the opportunity to respond to them in full. We've been researching, and I've looked through the software, and I've realized where there's been some miscommunication. Have I really told them anything? Right? It all sounds good, but does that help them get to the end result of their problem? If I said, thanks for sending me your email. I understand there's been some miscommunication. Let me try to resolve it for you. Number 1, here's the problem you said. Here's the resolution. Number 2, here's the problem. Here's the resolution. Number 3, right? And we're in and out of that email quickly, concisely, right? So concise, it's short, clear. Okay, there are a few things. 1, to make things concise, get in the habit of writing a lot, meaning velocity-wise. Okay? If you only write an email or only write a letter once a month, you're not going to get very good at this. So you guys need to practice writing in general. As you write, after you've finished, go back in and take out half the words that you wrote. Okay? Just across the board, find half the words and get rid of them until you can do that without altering the meaning of the sentence. I spent some time researching your issues. Let's take that one. Researching your issues. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words. Okay, I researched your issues. After researching. Right? I mean, we could actually get rid of that entire sentence in most cases. Right? But now we're at 2 words and we've conveyed the exact same thing. Right? We've had no loss of clarity by shortening our sentence. Okay. So you have to get in the habit of doing that. And then as far as being clear, a few things. Try not to go over 3 sentences in a paragraph, in general. Write as though you were writing to a 5th grader. Use 5th grade language. Okay? Take out all your big words. You're not impressing anyone with 4-syllable words that nobody's used. Even even adult words, right? I know we talked the other day that one of the words we had was elevate and alleviate. Okay, the reality is we very seldom. If I was talking to a fifth grader, am I going to say alleviate? No, it's a good adult word, but we're not going to use it in business communication because I could say, I'm fixing your problem. And yes, fixing means you've provided a solution. It does not mean you're about to do something. As far as being concise, 3-word sentences, right at the level of a fifth grader, and use bullet points and numbers as often as you can. Okay? The reality is most business people only scan through stuff. I'm not reading all those words in your email. I just want the answer. Okay? Consider what you do if you have to go online and read the Federal Register. Right? Does anybody read all 500 pages of that? No, they skim through until they find the key word or a paragraph that seems to, say what they're doing. Then they'll read that a little more in depth until they can rule out that paragraph has nothing to do with them. Okay? So when you start with 5 sentences about how you researched or how you care about them, it's like that recording, right? One of the reasons we changed the recording when you call into the Good Looking Company, if you call into a company and they say, your call is really important to us. It's like bullshit, right? If my call is important to you, you would have answered it, right? You wouldn't have given me a robot to answer the call. Right? Cyrus originally said, I know you don't like talking to a robot, but for the sake of cost, there's only, we have to get you to the right person. Unfortunately, the logistics of a business make it where you can't hire 5 people to answer phone calls just to route them to someone else. But at the same time, don't give insincere information or praise or flattery, okay? So the last thing is to be honest because people see through bullshit very quickly. All right, so with that in mind, your second project for the day, I've got a few things here. We might draw them out of a hat. All right, I want all of the advisors to go online and take at least one online course in business writing. Okay. I didn't have time to research any of those, so I tell you what, whoever finds that first, get it approved by Chris. Basically what we're looking for, not a long course, but one that's going to teach you to write. If you've got one, send it.
Several, but there was a couple of them that were really expensive.
Yeah, you should be able to find a free one. I mean, this isn't difficult, right? Effectively, what I want is you guys to learn just the art of writing. We're going to critique this for the next few weeks until you guys have gotten down the idea that it has to be clear and concise. Okay? So I think just going online, reading through an online course, and hopefully they'll force you to practice a little bit, will at least reinforce the idea of what I'm talking about. All right. Then we have 4 advisors. I have 4 projects. 3 of those are writing projects, and 1 of those is a software project. What's that? Who are we missing? Brandon. Always forget about Brandon. Sorry, bud. Hopefully you're on this call. Good, that gives me an extra project to come up with. All right, so I need 1 person who's going to help us enter in, who's actually going to be responsible for entering in all of the payroll information into the home cares system, all their licensing information, and then reviewing each of their employee files to make sure that their licenses are current. So that's for 2 home health agencies. And then we have 3 writing courses. 1, I need an essay on upcoming Medicare demonstration projects. Second one, I need somebody to take a table of contents for the Home Care Operations Bible that we've been writing and actually write a blurb for each process that goes into it. And then the third is we need a HIPAA privacy policy, 3 different HIPAA privacy policies that will go onto our website, into our home health admission packet, and in our company policy and procedure manual, which we have samples of. Okay. All right. Last thing. I know I'm giving you guys a lot, but we're leaving the country, and we're coming. We'll be back in February, but you have the month of February to get this done. Don't let that.
Don't do it like a last minute school assignment.
Yeah.
No procrastination.
I want you to take your biggest software client, okay, and I want you to write a report analyzing their entire operation using the compliance complex roles. I want to know how they're doing in each of those areas. That means like intake. I want a paragraph on what they do for intake, right? How many staff they have involved in intake, what their general procedures are. Then move to auth management or scheduling, whatever, patient management. When you get to the financial section, I want to know about the financial reports they run each month. Do they run a P&L? Do they run a balance sheet? Do they get a statement of cash flows? How do they get those? How do they run their cost report? Okay. I get this is actually a very, very big project, but I'm not going to tell you it has to be 10 pages. If you can get it done in, I don't think you'll be able to get it done in 2 pages, but if you can, more power to you.
Are we allowed
Okay.
to call and talk to the client about these different things?
Of course, they're your client,
Okay.
but I want you to do it in a way that, remember, your job is to be the expert, the authority on home health. So don't call in and say, oh, I'm doing a research project. I need to know how to do intake, right? You'd want to call and say, look, we're starting some monitoring services, or I want to make sure that you're getting the most out of your software experience. So do you mind if I talk to someone in your intake department for a few minutes? Do you mind if I talk to somebody in your scheduling department for a few minutes? Cool. Now remember, this is being turned into me. So when I say I'm looking for a report, what's the word count that I'm looking for? Closer to 0 you can get, the better, as long as it still gives me the information,
As long as it's concise.
right? How many bullet points am I looking for? Probably a lot. Okay? Not expecting you to write out, John Doe is their intake coordinator, and he answers the phone 3 to 5 times a day. He has a very chipper voice, right? I would be fine with saying their intake department consists of 23 people, and then bullet points. 5 of those are nurses, 4 of those are part-time receptionists. Bullet point, communication style, horrible. Right? And then maybe you want to give me a blurb that says, I called in and talked to them, and when they answered the phone, they just said, home health, right? Which unfortunately our home health agency was doing. And hopefully we're changing that with eBay being on the phone. But when you used to call our home health agency, that's what they said, home health, because they didn't know the name of the agency, because we were operating under 2 or 3 different names. So that was their fallback. For some reason, law firms universally do that. Law firm, right? Like, which law firm did I call? If I'm going down the yellow pages, like, tell me who I'm talking to. Okay. Anyway, that's what we'll do through the end of the month. There are a few, last thing, okay. When I talk about you guys on a personal growth schedule, okay, I know that we've said, in general, you guys should be here 9 to 4, okay? I don't have a problem with you getting here at 9 and leaving at 4. But if the only time you work on yourself or on this job is 9 to 4, there's no way you will be ready for what's coming over the next few months. Okay? Leaving at 4 is fine if that means you're going home and sitting out by your fire pit and reading a book on communication skills or writing an essay. Okay? I'm not expecting you guys, like, my expectation is that we put in a good 48 hours a week. Like, it's just a rule of thumb. A good 48 hours a week of work. Okay, I really don't want more than that because I think you start really damaging family time, etc. The reality is, throughout all of human history, people have worked 6 days a week, 10, 12 hours a week, and you know, when Judaism was implemented, you got to take Sunday off, right? Because you needed, scripturally, you need 1 day of rest. Right, but the rest of the time they're working 10 to 12 hours a week for 6 days a week. That's nearly 70 hours of work a week. We live in a very complex, complicated world. I know we have kids. We run them to different activities. Hopefully you guys are exercising, etc. 48 hours a week to me is the kind of the rule of thumb for success. You start working too much more than that on a consistent basis, you're going to have work-life issues, right? You're not going to be taking care of your body, which is going to cause you to suck when it comes to work, right? You're going to be stressed at home, etc. If you start working less than that, the reality is you're wasting your life. Like, I can't say it really any other way. I'd probably be nicer, but the reality is if you spend less time than that on work, and by work I mean the stuff that, like I told you, your job isn't necessarily defined as answering the phone, right? It's personal growth. So if you stop, if you're only putting in 35, 40 hours a week, and most of that is I'm waiting on the phone to ring, and the rest of the time I'm watching a movie or Netflix or reading a book that has nothing to do with personal growth, you're stagnating yourself, okay? Like, there's a reason the Army makes guys dig holes and then fill them back in, because number one, it helps keep their muscles in shape, but number two, it actually gives them something to do. Okay, Heather was talking to one of her friends the other day that mentioned how she was really depressed, and she said, well, that's because you work from home, right? You never leave. You get up and you get up in your pajamas and you go to bed in your pajamas. And while that may sound great, you do that for a couple of days. Like, the human mind isn't meant to stagnate, right? We're meant to grow. And so I'm expecting that you guys are putting a lot of work, honestly as much work as you're putting into your explicit job duties, into personal growth. Okay, so there should be a number of books that you're reading on a continual basis. We've got a bookshelf full of them. We added another bookshelf underneath. Right? A lot of audio books. I'm sure there's a library around here. You should be writing and practicing your writing. If you don't understand the nature of business, right, get some business books. If you don't understand how to write, get some writing books or business communication books. If you don't understand healthcare, okay, I mean, the reality is we've been in this for decades now, and we're still, I can't tell you how many regulations we've read in the past 2 months, right? Or how many books on business, or what audio books we have to go through, because that's the reason we have the Wall Street Journal come in, or Harvard Business Review. Okay, there's lots of information at your fingertips. The velocity that you pick up things will make a big difference in what we can do with you in the future. And I'm giving you guys this warning now, without looking at anyone, without even looking in the camera here, okay? I'm giving you guys something I need you to take to heart. We're on a trajectory as a business that requires us to have very, very competent employees, okay? Meaning you have to be able to write and verbally communicate in a way that shows authority, empathy, understanding, and to an extent humor. You have to know what you're talking about, so you have to have competence in your area of expertise. which there's not a role here that can show competence without an understanding of business, communication, and healthcare, right? You have to be at least a jack of all trades in those areas and hopefully an expert in at least some aspect of healthcare. And you have to be willing to continually grow and help, all right? March 1st, you will see some rapid escalation in what we're doing at this company. You have a little under a month to get the mindset and some of those base competencies up to par. I love all of you guys. But come March 1st, we cannot allow for incompetence, lack of ambition or motivation, lack of personal growth to drag the company down. Okay? So I'm throwing that out there now. This is your month to gather as much of that competency as you can, right? Because we have big plans for you guys coming up, and it goes way beyond software. I mean, it goes beyond the hospital. There's some huge things on the horizon, but I have to have, like, I can't oversee, I mean, you know, just to be blunt, we can't oversee writing an email. We can't oversee having how you research regulations. We can't oversee computer skills to a large extent. I mean, like, you name it, there's some basics of life that have to be in place, and we have to be able to trust you guys to communicate, right? You're going to be like healthcare advisors. That's what you guys are, okay? So as a healthcare advisor, I have to be able to trust you to dress appropriately, to act appropriately, to speak appropriately when you go on site to a customer, because you're going to have a lot more than software customers on your plate in the coming months, okay? You're going to be consultants, you're going to be educating, you may be on camera, right? In order to do that, I have to be able to trust that these basic competencies are met.
Audio Jungle.